Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I am Ravi Gupta. I am editor-in-chief of a magazine called eHealth. eHealth magazine has been there for around 15 years. We are the first magazine in this country and in Asia to focus on innovations in healthcare. And we have been a monthly magazine. We have been having an online portal, and we have been having a big presence on the social media. And in these times of the lockdown, when the whole world is grappling with this corona and the COVID situation, eHealth magazine has taken an initiative to speak to the healthcare stakeholders, the hospitals, the industry, and talk about that how has this COVID-19 situation impacted the healthcare industry, the hospital business, and the overall healthcare ecosystem of the country. And today we are fortunate to have an eminent panel with us. And the topic of this discussion is healthcare innovations, a paradigm shift in healthcare industry, and in the situation of corona pandemic. And I will be requesting each of the panelists to start with a brief intro of 1 minute or 1.5 minutes about yourself and your institution. So I will request Dr. Rakesh to start with.
Yeah, good afternoon all. I am Dr. Rakesh Gupta. I am chairman of the Sarvada Group of Hospitals. We are a 400-bedded tertiary care setup with all the super specialties. Initially, we were designated to be COVID-19 hospital as well for Faridabad, but later on the district decided that all be concentrated to the ESI hospital. So we are now currently we are having all board suspects with us, but once it is confirmed, we are sending patients to the designated COVID hospital. I am a physician by qualification. And thank you all for joining today's webinar on this corona pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh Gupta. May I request Yatish Wahal to introduce yourself?
Dr. Ravi, and thank you, eHealth, for giving this opportunity to be a part of this webinar. I am an executive director with the Naiti Healthcare Group of Hospitals. We are a tertiary care focused healthcare hospital operating facilities in the state of Uttar Pradesh, in Mathura, Agra, and Delhi. In Vimans is the center that we operate along with Seth Sundarlal Jain Hospital. As a group, we have about 600 beds under our wings. And we had initially dedicated 300 odd beds for COVID under the orders of the UP government. Mathura had a dedicated corridor comprising of 3 floors and 200 beds as a level 3 care center. And Agra has a dedicated level 1 quarantine center. Of late, the government has earmarked and demarcated that hospitals that are to offer only COVID care should then not be offering multi-speciality care, and they've made private and government-owned medical colleges or designated ESI colleges as centers adhering to COVID care. Accordingly, today we are in Mathura doing just screening, and any positive cases are then sent away to the designated COVID center. So we today have the experience of managing COVID patients level 3, level 1, as well as non-COVID patients. And these are tough times, I think, uncharted waters, which none of us have experienced in the past. And given whatever the circumstances are, the government, as well as us as healthcare workers, we're doing and trying to give it our best shot. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Yatish. Yeah, thanks for joining. May I request Dr. Sopan Sood to please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. I'm director of a 250-bedded multi-specialty hospital in Jalandhar. It's called Patel Hospital. It's one of the oldest hospitals in Jalandhar since around 1975. And we are a private hospital, and we have worked with the rest of the IMA to set up a separate COVID hospital, just as Yatish was saying, where we have 50 beds which we have dedicated to the civil authorities when they will require it in our place. By my education, I am a urologist and a transplant surgeon qualified from All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and I have been the medical superintendent since the last 7 years. And this is my first experience of a pandemic and how to deal with the situation. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion on this panel from such luminaries like Dr. Rakesh Gupta and Dr. Sunil and Dr. Yatish and everybody over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sopan, for joining us. May I request Dr. Sunil Kumar Sagar to please introduce yourself.
Sunil Sagar. I'm CEO of Shanti Mukund Hospital. We are a 200-bedded super specialty hospital specialized in cancer care, all modalities of cancer. This hospital was set up by Dr. R.P. Gupta, a leading cardiothoracic surgeon. And we are 25 years in serving the community. We are a known community hospital and known for the values which we process and preach. We are a non-COVID hospital as of now, and basically, but treat all the emergencies and other things which are coming to us. The danger which we see here is that most of the time, the patients which we receive, they are asymptomatic. Though we take all the precautions and all the PPEs and other things which are social distancing and control they have been established, but still the challenge is there. The problem in our case gets confounded with the conflicting view.
Sir, your audio has an issue. Like, if you can speak near the mic, there is an audio issue.
Sorry?
Bit of an audio issue. Like if you can speak near to the mic.
Okay. All right. Is it audible now? Is it audible now?
Yes. And put your face in the center of the camera. Like face. Yes. Better.
Is it okay, sir?
Much better.
Yeah. Okay. So the third point basically I was making is that we are surviving. We are in East Delhi, in Karkaduma, and the nearby areas, they are most of the things, they are the literally infected and infested with the virus area. We had a patient coming, and we are leading dialysis center, and as we all know, that dialysis is very prone to having this sort of cases. The patients are immunocompromised. So that the whole problem in our case started on 2nd of April, when a patient came to hospital casualty, brought death with no history. Nobody came, even the patient attendant or the patient relatives, and nobody knew that the patient is a COVID positive. So after the patient was discharged, when in fact the body was released, then later in the night we came to know that he was a COVID one, and then the whole problem started.
Sure. So, may I request Dr. VP Singh to please introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, good morning to everybody. Yeah, I'm working in Subharti Medical College and Associated Hospital. This is a tertiary care hospital with more than 900 beds. It is all the major specialties and some of the super specialties. Now, in the UP state, it's one of the prominent private medical colleges, where with 150 UG seats and about 100 PG seats. So you can understand that it is very vibrant in its working, and OPD is about 2,000 per day. But after this, we got the responsibility of the COVID. Then initially to start with, we started with 200 isolation beds with 20 beds of with ventilator support ICU. But now we have been asked to raise this as to 400 beds, and we will looking after only the COVID patients. So it has been converted into a COVID hospital like some of the other medical colleges. So we are gearing up for that, though we have certain deficiencies here and there, but we are going into this, and we are in constant touch with the authorities higher up to facilitate our function and do a good job for the patients. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. VP Singh. May I request Gaurav Arya to speak, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gaurav Arya. And before I start introducing, I'm extremely privileged to be in such great company of panelists here. And though I'm the only odd one out because I'm not from I'm a non-medico here. However, I've been working in the healthcare field for the last 10 years. I work for the ASP division of Johnson & Johnson Medical India, which basically deals with infection prevention solution and sterilization solution. We have a flagship sterilizing solution called Sterad. And this time is especially difficult for us as well, because being in the healthcare field, especially on the infection prevention side, I and my team across the country have been really working to support all our customers and hospitals and surgeons to continue with their sterilizing needs. Although the elective surgeries have come down drastically, but the reprocessing need for respirators have really gone up during this time. And we are one of the few sterilizing companies who have received the US FDA EOA or emergency authorization used to reprocess N95 respirators. I'm really looking forward to session today to learn from all the panelists here. And I really want to thank Dr. Gupta and his team at eMagazine for giving the opportunity.
So we are going to start with a brief presentation by Gaurav Arya, and then we are going to start the panel discussion. So may I request Gaurav to start your presentation, please?
Yeah, just give a second. Let me just share my screen.
And as Gaurav said, we are honored to have a very eminent panel who are experts and leaders in their own cities and their own states in the field of healthcare. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, Gaurav, please.
Yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So thank you once again, eMagazine and Dr. Ravi Gupta's team. Before I start, once again, a deep sense of gratitude and thank you to all the panelists here, because while I'm sitting at home right now, I'm sure most of you are in your setups, looking after the hospital and ensuring that some patient is being taken care of, whether it's a COVID hospital or a non-COVID hospital. So while we can't throw flowers at you, but a deep thank you to all of you here and all the medicos and all the surgeons and doctors who are present on the Zoom call from me and my team at Johnson & Johnson. Thank you once again for all that you're doing today to take care of people like us and the patients. So very important topic, which is healthcare innovation and how post the pandemic, what will the healthcare industry and look like, especially on the infection prevention side, and how can technology, and like we are using technology to do this seminar, to do this webinar, what role can technology play to remove or to reduce infections in the healthcare setup and increase efficiency, something which will be the buzzword, efficiency, as we move from this time to a post-COVID era. So like all of us have shared and all of us would be knowing this, very, very difficult times, completely unprecedented. I think I don't need to really share what is there on this slide, but this is something that at least my generation would hope that we don't see again in our life anymore beyond this. Completely unprecedented, and I'm sure the panelists here also represent may not have seen such a scenario in their past times as well. And like one of the panelists said, these are uncharted territories. We don't know what's going to happen. Global pandemic was last seen almost 100 years back. But what does this pandemic tell us? Right? You know that there are great perils to live in a globalized world. And I'm sure as the slide shows that many of the authors, renowned authors, are saying that this pandemic shows that how deeply the world today is interconnected. Obviously, we were using the benefits or reaping the benefits of interconnectedness from a globalized economy, where we would use an iPhone designed in California and manufactured and assembled in China, or use a product made somewhere else, shipped by somebody and used in our houses. But this pandemic has showed how, if we reverse this order, how deeply interconnected our life is, that somebody getting an infection in some part in China has led to such a widespread pandemic all around the world that almost every country is now suffering from it, and nothing has been left untouched by this pandemic. So what more to show the importance of interconnectedness? And I think this is the biggest lesson that all of us are learning slowly, that we can't find ourselves completely isolated, even if me or my family or my close ones or my community or society may be healthy, but we cannot consider ourselves isolated. If some problem happens in one part of the world, the way we are deeply connected is actually brought to fore by this global pandemic. And it's not really an outlier. It is, like the picture says, it is a part of our interconnected viral age. This slide actually shows how so many different ways, so many parts of our life are deeply interconnected globally, whether it is an economic risk. So if you remember almost 12 years back in 2008, we have our global economic recession, which hit all of us. Then we have the environmental risk, which we all face. I'm sure all of us would have noticed the way climate is today. You know, I have not seen a March, April, or May, which has been surprisingly so pleasant ever before in my life. So this is obviously the change of a climate action, climate extreme weather, different weather. Then we are obviously seeing governance failure of trying to cope up with the situation in many parts of the world today. Similarly, cyber attacks. All of us are deeply interconnected. So whether it's technology, society, geopolitical risk, whether a terrorist attack happens somewhere, our lives are always connected. And there is no way that any one of us, whether we live in the metros or we live in remote village in any part of India, we cannot consider ourselves that something is happening to some part of the world and my life is going to be immune, right? And why am I sharing this interconnectedness thing with all of you? Why? Because similarly is a situation of what happens to in a really complex environment in a hospital, right? A patient goes to a hospital for a treatment, and the way the complexity in a hospital shapes up, so many moving parts are there in a hospital, which will impact somebody who moves in a hospital for possibly an OPD or for possibly a surgical treatment will definitely get impacted. And this is where we come to these news articles, which are obviously very long. But the focus of my presentation would be to talk about hospital-acquired infections. Now, infection is a buzzword today. Everybody is talking about infection. Whether it's infection is something that we don't want to hear about anymore. But hospital-acquired infection is a reality, and there have been several reports which share that HAI or hospital-acquired infection is very high, especially in emerging economies. 1 in 20 patients in the United States get impacted, 1 in 10 in European Union, and for a country like India, 20 to 25% of patients visiting a hospital for a treatment will get a hospital-acquired infection. Hospital-acquired infection can be simply defined by an infection that you receive when you visit a hospital for a problem that you did not go there for. And the top 4 categories are surgical site infections, COTIs, VAPs, and CLABSIs. Out of this, the focus of what I will be talking about essentially today in the next few minutes will be the surgical site infection, which form actually the large part of almost 20 to 25% of part of the hospital-acquired infection that patients are exposed to when they visit a hospital. And most of it, almost all of it, is actually associated with the way devices in a hospital are cleaned and sterilized from the prior patient use or from being disinfected. So what are the implications of a hospital-acquired infection? This is a big problem, in fact. And what do patients have to bear? They have to bear longer length of stay in a hospital. Cost of care goes up. Some of it may be reimbursable, but predominantly in a country like India, where out-of-pocket is what people pay by predominantly, and insurance is not really deeply penetrated, cost of care goes up for the patient and the family. Patient suffering, no doubt about it. Patient suffers tremendously, patient and patient's attendance. And yes, antimicrobial resistance. This is something that there have been so many reports, especially for an emerging market like India. No new antibiotics are coming. The last antibiotic that came was almost 20 to 30 years back. And most of the pharma companies are not really actually even making antibiotics anymore. So if you look at this scenario, the situation is very tough. And if you look at now from a COVID point of view, because it's so contagious, people walking in a hospital for a non-COVID activity are so obviously highly likely to get the infection. What are the reasons? And surgical site infection is something that comes from a currently isolated place in a hospital called CSSD, which actually plays the most critical role in managing infection in a hospital. But the way hospitals, not just in India but around the world, is run, everybody has a different opinion on CSSD. The surgeon and the surgical team feel that their role is mainly to do operations and treat their patients, and CSSD operation is not their concern because they are already very busy, and it is the hospital administration that has to take care. The finance and purchase team are obviously under pressure to keep the costs down, and the facility heads are more so now in post-COVID will be concerned on profitability or ROI. And around all of these concerns, the CSSD, which is considered the heart of any hospital, because that is where all the devices, all the instruments that are used in a surgery get reprocessed, get sterilized. They are where, this is the area where these instruments are taken care of, whether it's cleaned, dried, disinfected, and sterilized. So what do we see here? Post-COVID, what is the kind of CSSD? And I'm keeping the context very, very important here, because we are not really living in ordinary times. Things will change once lockdown is lifted and once hopefully normalcy is restored. What is the kind of situation we are possibly likely to look in CSSD post-COVID? And I'll be requesting inputs from all the surgeons and administrators here. Is that obviously the trained staff, how to continue doing the work in CSSD in the best possible manner, how to reprocess and manage the instruments following the protocol of the hospital. Productivity, which will be very, very key going forward. Why? Because everything will be considered, everything will be measured going forward. Productivity of CSSD staff has always been a concern, but as hospitals come under increased pressure to maintain their top line and the bottom line, productivity of the staff will be, especially in CSSD, will be of great importance. Cost control, how CSSD will continue to control costs. CSSD has always been considered as a cost center, but the imperative on every department today in the hospital will be now how to manage cost, how to increase productivity, and at the same time keep trained staff to carry out operations. And at the same time, regulatory pressures will, I think, will go up even more. Whether it's assurance on sterilization, whether it's compliance, whether it is being ready for audits, because I'm sure globally, whether it's the CDC, whether it's US FDA, whether it is all the other regulatory bodies, and even in India, ICMR and India FDA will actually come out with increasingly more stricter measures to contain such situations to evaporate from every hospital. So audit readiness will be even key. So how can we utilize technology in CSSD? That is a key question here. And technology will become the mainstay of every industry, and definitely for healthcare. Obviously, pre-healthcare, there was a lot of conversation about robotics, about high-end technologies. But as healthcare and hospitals across the world come under tremendous pressure, I think the question will be is to tomorrow, post-COVID, will not be about robotics, but I think how to run a hospital in the best possible way, maintaining the cost, the use of technology to do the same works that was requiring maybe 4 or 5 people earlier. So can we save, from a CSSD perspective, can we save on repair cost of instruments, right? Rather than buying more and more instruments, increasing our instrument inventory, rather than can we make do with the same instruments and manage repair costs? Can we save on replacement cost of instruments rather than looking at keeping a capex budget for buying more instruments? Can I save and run the same set of instruments longer? Can I save on power and water? How can CSSD be made a mainstay and be integrated with the hospital IT department? Because technology, as I said, is going to be the winning factor going forward for every hospital, whether it's a chain or a standalone setup. And can the CSSD provide audit-ready data? Today, most of the hospitals in India, even the large corporate ones, are maintaining manual audit files, most of it. and obviously there is a manual error that is there, that is quite likely. So can the CSSD, which is the mainstay, the main heart of hospital surgeries, can it provide audit-ready data at all times, which is real time? And can CSSD become a revenue center going forward? Can is India a place where CSSD can become a revenue center and actually start contributing to the hospital top line? This is where ASP, which is a world leader in sterilization products, come into play. We are a market leader in sterilization products, especially on low temperature sterilization. Our flagship product is a machine called Sterad, which can be used to sterilize all low temperature instruments, that are used in a hospital. We have a range of devices, a range of machines for every setup, whether it's a standalone ophthalmic setup or a multi-specialty setup or a government institute, from a smaller machine, which is a tabletop, to a large size big machine, which can take care of all the sterilization needs for a multi-specialty hospital. I've been just going to play a small video for you. Apologies that because of my problem in my laptop, the volume may not be available, but the video will actually give you a significant idea of what ASP does today. So this is our velocity biological indicator, which now gives results in 15 minutes. This is a slightly dated video, but we have recently received US FDA approval, which gives biological indicator result in 15 minutes, really strengthening the hospital instrument recall policy. This entire system is actually connected over the internet, can be connected through the hospital IT system. So this is not really a standalone machine, which can be kept, which is just kept in one isolated place. All cycle data, date and everything can be actually connected to a portal on the mobile or on a desktop. And like you see here, this is our ASP ecosystem, where we have the connected device, the machine, which sterilizes, the indicator system, and the console, where one can keep the data completely ready for any kind of record management and audit. So this is where CSSD can really utilize technology and efficiency and generate data for surveillance, for audit, for analytics, and to see how productive my CSSD staff is, right? And today, I would say Sterad, we already have around 550 plus installations in the country, around the country in India today. But I would say Sterad is a lot more relevant today than ever before. It is a low temperature hydrogen peroxide based sterilizing device. It has short cycle times, right from 24 minutes to 72 minutes. So it leads to faster turnaround time for instruments. So you don't have to really keep too many instruments as your inventory, and the same set of instruments can be used to run more cycles, more surgeries because of the shorter cycle time. It is a plug and play. You don't need any commissioning, don't need any, even if you have an existing setup, you can simply, this is the biggest machine is almost the size of a refrigerator. This is plug and play, whether it's in CSSD, TSSU, or in the OT. You just bring the machine and plug in, you can start away. And biggest benefit today is that it reduces interruptions in workflow. It reduces human error because a lot of it is already connected. So one saves on human error, one saves on the personnel cost, and you are absolutely assured of terminal sterilization, meaning the instruments that come out of the machine actually are ready to be taken for the surgery. So how does Sterad help save costs? This is an important question in everybody's mind, especially when we move to post-COVID era, where every hospital is really waiting for elective surgeries to start and normalcy to be restored. So repair cost can be reduced drastically because the damage to the instruments, especially the sensitive instruments, which are temperature sensitive, can be reduced by up to 58%. And these are all studies that are done in the past or in multi-specialty hospital setups. Today, I'm sure most of the hospitals that you are a part of will be spending, at least prior to the pandemic, a significant amount of money either in maintaining the instruments or buying new instruments every year, keeping a separate budget. But when we move to Sterad, there is a 58% reduction in damage cost to instruments. replacement cost can be reduced by half. Why? Because the same instruments can be used, because they're getting damaged less compared to an steam autoclave, which actually over a repeated usage damages the instruments a lot. But because STERRAD is a low temperature sterilizer, it reduces damage to the instruments, and the same instrument can be used for longer cycles. And as a result, you don't have to really set aside significant budget every year to replace your instruments. Water cost. Now, this is predominantly in comparison to steam autoclave. For a country like India, yes, we are a country which has importance of economies. So steam autoclave can definitely not be completely avoided in a setup, but it can only be used with STERRAD. A steam autoclave can only be concerned with, maybe ward instruments or linens or cotton and all those kind of instruments, which devices and items which are water absorbing or moisture absorbing. So even a smaller autoclave can actually support a hospital. Because today, if you look at the water that is consumed, especially the RO water, a huge amount of water is consumed in every hospital, which is a huge saving if one moves to STERRAD, because almost 1.9 lakh liters of water is used every year. And obviously, because we cannot completely avoid autoclave, a hospital which is looking at phasing out their old autoclave can look at a smaller autoclave rather than looking at those big size machines which require commissioning, which require maintenance, which require regular surveillance on the quality of water, the portability of water, and so on and so forth. Energy cost. STERRAD's energy consumption is very, very minute compared to a steam or a ETO, and one can really look at an annual energy savings of 68% because of the decrease in energy required to run a STERRAD for the same amount of instruments like that ETO may be using. And obviously the other benefits that I mentioned were reduced inventory load, reduced turnaround time, because you don't maintain so many instruments inventory to run the same amount of surgeries in a hospital. And one can be 100% sure of sterilized instruments in every single load. How can really STERRAD increased compliance within CSSD? The biological indicator time actually is now reduced to 15 minutes compared to 4 to 6 hours for ETO and almost a day for steam autoclave. And that gives you the confidence that every instrument that is now going for surgery is completely sterile even before the surgery starts. Because with a 15-minute biological indicator time, this although here I mentioned 30 minutes, but recently we have received the USFDA approval for 15 minutes, and our BI actually is also approved now as a process control device. So this is, I think, revolutionary from the perspective of how sterilization and infection control can really fasten up the process. All the results that come now from the biological indicator can be collected automatically within the information technology system. STERRAD is actually validated to sterilize machine devices for 23,000 medical devices. So this is a very important strength. Why? Because as per the USFDA and CDC, the device manufacturers themselves run and test their devices before they launch out in the market, whether STERRAD can sterilize these devices, both for material integrity and sterility assurance. So every device that you have in your hospital, most of them will actually already be validated to be reprocessed and sterilized in STERRAD. We offer integrated quality features. So everything that you saw on the video today is automatically connected using the ASP Access ecosystem. And that gives you the confidence that all your data of cycle, of which user ran the machine, everything is automatically getting collected and stored for audit and surveillance. This was a recent EOA that we received from USFDA to actually to be able to decontaminate N95 respirators, something that was currently still is in dire use. So that enables the hospital to continue to reuse their N95 respirators up to 480 respirators per day. The recommendation is to not sterilize more than twice. But actually, this eases a lot of pressure that hospital or COVID hospitals have today to provide PPE to their hospital workers. And sterilization can continue to help. Like I mentioned, these are dollar values, but proportionately we can reduce them and see how economical STERRAD is actually in the world today post-COVID in keeping the costs low for the hospital. This is a text heavy, but this again talks about the importance of technology today. And I will be happy to take more questions on details of this technology post my presentation. And I thank you for your time, and I can take questions now or later.
Yeah, so Gaurav, thanks for the presentation, and we can go for questions a bit later.
Sure.
You can remove the screen. Yeah, thank you. So we will start our panel discussion. The first issue, what we are going to discuss is about the impact of Corona on the healthcare sector. How has it taken a toll on the healthcare business? So may I request Dr. Swapan Sood to start this, and I will request each of the panelists to keep your answers to 2 minutes each, and so that we can take more questions. Yeah. Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, Dr. Swapan. Yeah.
Okay, is it okay now?
Yes, yes.
So thanks, Dr. Ravi, for giving me this question, and I've been pestered by this question for a long time since this lockdown started. And I'll try to sort of make a scenario where we can find our own answers for each of us in this thing. So actually your question says that there are 4 questions which are inbuilt into your question. First question is, will healthcare actually change because of the Corona? So that is the first question, because I believe in our ICUs and in our high HCUs, we were already taking the precautions to prevent infection control. However, we'll need to probably intensify those efforts. If there is going to be change, what is the exact change which will come into the healthcare? Where will it affect us most? How we will do that? And then whether this change is going to be permanent or not, because as we discussed in our this thing also, where the change is, where is it going to be temporary only for the lockdown period, or only for the pandemic period, only for the endemic period, or till the herd immunity kicks in, maybe a year and a half down the line or 2 years down the line, where will these measures go? And accordingly, the cost assessment has to be taken into this. And finally, I think the change will come differently in different places. In Punjab, the change will be different as compared to, say, Maharashtra or West Bengal. And perhaps in Mizoram, there might be no change which is to be entered in. Here also, I'd like to point out that there are 2 different things as far as Corona is concerned. One is the coronavirus itself and its impact upon on the healthcare. And then there is another factor, which I call the fear of Corona, which is also impacting a lot of our decision making and really affecting the doctors and the population general health, because they're really going into an overkill phase, and they really don't know whether that is enough to take care of us. Well, there are 4 areas in which the impact is going to be there. There is going to be the impact on the hospitals per se. I think the revenues are going to decrease, because you can see what is happening already. The hospital occupancies or revenue collections are down to about 20 to 25% of what it was there originally. It is going to have an impact on the paramedical workforce. You know, all the paramedical workforce is actually very elitist. They are trained in very, very small, complex medical procedures. For example, your technician inside the operation theater. Let's say he's trained only for gastroenterology, and somehow he doesn't belong to Punjab, or he belongs to some outside area. And then he just sort of disappears when the migrant population starts going back. The scare factor is chasing them away back to their own villages over there. So in the revenue, I foresee what is going to happen is that initially, because some of the decrease in revenues will need to compensate from whatever little reserves which are there. So some of the central government payments, etc., might come in over the next couple of months, and we might be able to just keep our nose above the water. And immediately after we are through this phase, you know, about 80% of the costs of a hospital are non-reducible costs. You have the salaries, you have the AMCs, you have the CMCs, you have the electricals, you have the what not you have. There only the 20% variability probably relies in how efficiently you use these areas. For example, you might be able to push your electricity bill by a few percent points, but not much more than that. And I think initially what is going to happen, there is going to be a reaction from the health. At least I can speak for the hospitals of my sector. I'm not sure about the corporate groups. Initially, there is going to be kind of a backlash where to get that 80% revenue, to keep themselves afloat, everybody is going to decrease their cost so that they can volume-based collection of revenue can be there, and they'll increase the volume of work by just lowering their cost. And this is going to kill some of the weaklings. This is going to really take an impact on some of those hospitals which cannot take a revenue reduction. Typically, those patients who are having large loan burdens from banks, and that loan the EMI is fixed, and that is going to take a huge toll on the collections of the hospital, and it's going to result in those weaklings really going into some kind of a crisis. And as the situation will develop, fewer hospitals will emerge little bit with their nose above the water, and then there is going to be a price rise, provided the government doesn't step in and start capping the prices over there. In paramedical forces, we are going to face some kind of a crisis, in the sense that many people, for example, in Punjab, today, out of 9 lakh immigrant workers over here, almost 7 lakh have registered to back to their native places. So all the paramedical workers, the ward boys, who were there on a semi-permanent basis, they're all moving back to their villages because they feel safer over there. So these are two things which I think are going to happen directly on the hospitals. On the doctors, well, they are already having lesser patients, and they have two problems on their hands. They are going to have a decrease in revenue. I think all the hospitals are going to sooner or later have to sit down. I think Dr. Sagar is going to have to sit down. Dr. VP Singh is going to have to sit down with the doctors. Look, doctor, the revenues are really less, and we have to do something about your salary. We cannot pay you. Either I'm going to defer it, or I'm going to reduce your salary for a certain period of time. And let's see what happens after 2 or 3 months. And also the scare factor is there in the doctors itself. They are scared to go out and treat the patients. Many of the doctors did not turn up for ICU duties because they were scared what is going to go on. And I think all those flower showerings and all those COVID warriors, all this is come basically to boost up the medical force to go up and stand by their posts and sort of handle the situation as it happens. The last people who are affected in the healthcare are the patients. Everybody is scared to go to a hospital now. I don't know how you are going to handle, Dr. Itish, you are going to handle as a COVID hospital. That level is going to stay with you for a long time, I think. And this is one of the things which we anticipated. So as a group in our city, our president was very dynamic. Quickly, we isolated a facility which was outside the city, set up a 50-bedded unit and made it into a COVID hospital for patients who are going to go from there. So that, and we talk to the civil authorities, please, if there are any patients, after they go to the civil hospital and to their authorities, if there is any overflow, we'll take up over in these patients and we'll treat them free of cost or almost free of cost in this area. So I get a call every other day, doctor, we want to come to the hospital, but I am not sure whether you are COVID free or not. So what do you want me to do? I think there are some hidden opportunities also. It is giving you a very good opportunity to have a close look at your HR. When you had gained fat during your little bit of opulent times, now it is time to reduce that fat. You are looking at your processes again and again. So you are looking to make them more lean and more mean so that you are able to get more work out of those people whom you will continue to employ over the next few days. I think a new section in hospitals has opened up, which is the work from home sector. So your accounts can work from home. A lot of your HR can work from home. Very few people need to actually come over here. A lot of your quality controls, who are working on the reports and the auditing, they can work from home if you have a digital kind of a setup. And for all that work from home, there is going to be a push into digitalization of your hospital. Many of the processes which were manual are going to be converted into automated digital processes. Some hospitals have already taken a lead onto that, and I think this is going to work in favor of the hospitals in cutting down their costs. And for example, one of the simple things is the e-prescription, the telemedicine, which is going to come in. So a patient coming from 100 kilometers away or 150 kilometers away, many times it has been an eye-opener for me. Many of the patients I have been able to heal without sort of calling them to the hospital. Now that entails two problems. I have to give them an e-prescription and all the legal issues which are associated with them. But it also, a lost visit to the hospital also means less revenue for the hospital. There is less sale of medicine, less laboratory, less other consultations which are occurring, and basically you focus only on consultations in these cases. So I see that e-pharmacy might come up. Hospitals might sort of go into e-pharmacy. Okay, we have given you an e-prescription. Now let us deliver the medicine to you. Local tie-up with the labs over there. Okay, we have given you an e-prescription. Now get the test from this lab so that they can send us the reports. So things like those innovations are likely to come up over the next few months. But I think it's, like I said, a latest situation in a fast-changing scenario, and a lot of decisions will need to be taken over the next few weeks.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Sopan. Great inputs. Dr. Sunil Kumar, your inputs, please.
I think the healthcare delivery was in any case going to change. The only change probably this corona will bring is to expedite the change. The whole healthcare scene was changing. And in fact, if you look at the hospitals of 10 years hence or 15 years hence, one can always anticipate a different type of a hospital. The impact of this corona on the health industry will increase the cost. It will increase the cost, and the survival for the hospital will be difficult. Given that, as Dr. Sapana said, telemedicine, yes, you can do telemedicine, but the main source of revenue for the hospital is the diagnostics and the other things. The patient will come to the doctor, will have a telemedicine or teleconsultation, but then he will like to go to the nearest diagnostic center or other thing to get his test done. The revenue the hospital will get hit on that account. There is a huge infrastructure cost which is going to be impacted by this, because to maintain that huge infrastructure with the less number of patients is going to further impact the revenue. When we talk about the positive side of this, the corona effect will be that it will create more of awareness. Yes, that life is going to change after this thing, but at the same time, working from home, for example, and the economy, ultimately they're saying we may not die with the corona, but we may die with the starvation. The economy is going to be worst hit by this. The survival has to be there. You have to grow. The government has to spend more, and the role of the private players has to be. It will bring in the role of the private players, because as such now, maintaining the physical distances, having less number of people in the offices, and within that space, the physical distances will definitely call for that we have to have bigger spaces. The spaces which can otherwise be used for the patient, which in any case the load is going to reduce, will ultimately impact the revenue of the hospital. Ultimately, it will also bring in the introduction of the multitasking by the working staff, whether the paramedical staff or the other things. So that is another opportunity to bring in that. Looking at the point of view of the technology, ultimately we have to resort to the more and more use of technology, because ultimately if we do not do this, when we heard this, saw this presentation, the infection control takes a lot of toll on the hospital revenues. And even at our hospital, we have introduced a system of sanitizing the N595 masks and other things, because it is a need of the time. We cannot keep on and then ultimately the waste management, all those things. When we come to the waste disposal, that will again throw a big challenge. Now, are we actually conscious of that, how to dispose of these masks, which otherwise could be perceived to be a virus infected? So these throws many challenges, and when we talk about the hospital business as such is going to get a big hit. We all have to be very conscious when we look at there are social, there are emotional aspects of this. The hospital management, they are supposed to pay to the workers, to the staff, to the doctors, all others who are working for it. And the expectation from the staff is that whether we work, whether we don't work, we should be paid. But ultimately, if you are a government organization, you are paying the money by putting your hands into the taxpayer pockets. But when it is a private organization with no help, you see, when we run a charitable hospital, the charitable hospital is a purely charitable hospital. A purely charitable 10% by patient, maybe because of the requirement or something. But when we say we are free. And where all those free patients have gone. When we say that patients do not come to the hospital, scared of coming to the hospital. Even the paid patient have. Yesterday, I received a message which says that if the hospital was expecting the patient to get his COVID test done, and there was an elective surgery which has to be performed. And no, it's not a question of elective surgery or emergency surgery. The patient says, okay, doctor, you are asking me to get your COVID test done. Have you got your COVID test done? It throws a big question, actually. The biggest big question. Okay. Well, whether now we say that, okay, get a undertaking consent signed from the patient, but that is only to safeguard against the legal implication, legal hassles. But do we have an answer? Do we have an answer? What is going to change? And your initial question that whether it's going to stay or is going to die down or will wipe out from the scene, it is a self-eliminating disease. And how do we treat our patients? How do we treat the patient having a COVID suffering? One of my colleagues, his wife worked for a government hospital and she got infected. And she got infected, she's asymptomatic. And the presented with no symptoms. The sample was given, report was not coming. Stayed in a family with a joint family. Her husband had no symptom. His 2.5 years old son has no symptom. Mother has no symptom. But when, as a precautionary measure, because she was working and with 12 of her colleagues, they were found to be having COVID. So their sample was sent and they are all positive, they're COVID positive. The biggest problem you see which we face and which we probably will spread the viral, which will become, it will later on maybe cover other questions, will come to this epidemic is going to increase because of the trait which is available, which is going on, asymptomatic. When you look at this example of this, my friend, but they are all, if you look at it, they have no temperature, they have no congestion, they have nothing. And this is for 10 days. In 10 days time, they are not. And ultimately, supposing by chance they have not got the test done, they must be roaming about in the community and this will spread. This will spread. So therefore, what will change? It will greatly impact later on. And with one such incident, the scare gets increased. As we all understand, we all face the same problem, whether it's a lesser or a bigger magnitude. And then the doctor says that why should I come? There's a lot of confusion on the use of PPEs. There are a lot of circulatory advisories, what sort of PPEs, because people feel that PPE is a word. So PPE means that PPE means PPE. We do not actually know. We do not even make an effort to. So this is a very scary thing. We still have to. We as a health worker, we have to fight from the front. So this is how it is going to impact the health business. The government participation, the PPPs, that will increase. Every now and then the government is coming up to inquire the hospital and they are taking up the hotels and the other things to put the patient over there. So this will, what I in brief want to say is it will impact the economy, and when the economy gets killed, nothing will, it's not only the hospital industry, everything will get killed. So that's what my thought process is.
Thank you, Dr. Sunil. May I request Dr. Rakesh Gupta to please respond?
Ravi, let me start from where Dr. Sood left. Dr. Sood very elaborately discussed about the fallout of this COVID pandemic. there's a downfall and there's an opportunity as well. I believe that the primary and the secondary healthcare is going to suffer the most. The tertiary care can still sustain to some extent. The doctors, individual doctor clinics are going to be closed for quite some time, maybe another 1 month, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months. Similarly, the small nursing homes, 10, 20, 50 hospitals are going to suffer a lot, both because of the patient phobia as well as because of the doctor phobia, both. The tertiary care, with being the larger in capacity and with the larger teams to handle the situation, with more guidelines coming from there with their own protocols getting set in the place, they will be able to handle the situation better, whether COVID or not. I agree that the revenue is going to fall for the tertiary care because the major revenue comes from the elective procedures, like in neurosurgery or in joint replacements or other bigger surgeries. There is going to be a lull for some time, maybe 1 month, maybe 2 months, but we are going to recover after. The opportunity which I see is, I fully agree with Dr. Sood's opinion that the cost structure is going to change forever. We'll have to become lean in management. We'll have to be more efficient as far as HR is concerned. We'll have to automate ourselves so that there's lesser number of people are required. Some of us may be working from home as well. And yes, definitely, the fat has to go away. And we have to become more efficient. The second important aspect is that I understand that technology is going to play a very big role in times to come. The automation, as Gauravari also said, that even SCSSD is going to be automated. So all the procedures will be automated. Telemedicine, yes, I agree. To some extent, it is going to help, not to large extent. All patients can be dealt, new patients cannot be dealt. But with telemedicine also, I understand that once the technology improves and we can have a look and feel of the patient, and maybe we deal with the hub and spoke model, where we are at the hub and the spoke somewhere else is working on our behalf at a distance away, and less patients will be coming to hospitals. I'm not worried about the revenue part at all. Even during Corona, mild symptomatic patients, the government has allowed them to stay at home quarantine with certain facilities of isolation and with one-to-one patient care, where the technology can play a big part. We have got wires monitors. We can monitor your things, vitals from a distance. So this model can evolve in this Corona times, and maybe later on also in home care, it is coming up very interesting. Technology can also be used to display the knowledge to handle the Corona in these times. For example, we are right now sitting in a Zoom seminar. Otherwise, we would have been holding it in a hotel or some other place in a banquet. But the knowledge dissipation also has taken a good step with the technology getting advanced. Maybe right now we are using Zoom platform, but in times will there be multiple more platforms which will be available for distribution of medical knowledge to both physicians as well as to the paramedic staff and other people as well. We have used the technology very nicely to connect with the people in our times. We have many Facebook live sessions with our consultants, dwelling on different topics of on corona-related topics on a day-to-day basis. And we will be having huge response and a huge connect with the patients. My doctors having views of around 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 2.5 lakh views each session. That means we have been able to maintain a very good connect, and the confidence of the patient is lying still with us. Another thing is we were discussing about the infection part. Infection, again, the number of patients coming to hospitals should be less. The people working in the hospital should be less. And we can definitely have certain more technology. For example, we have seen the videos of certain robots distributing meals in the wards. That also reduces the manpower contact with the patients and reduces the chances of infection. From the government side, I will expect the government to give us some support to startups, funding the startups, giving low-cost loans, waiving of the taxes in the initial setups, reducing the GST and reducing the excise or the other taxes, so to make the healthcare systems available at a lesser cost. Because to serve the masses, we need to have the healthcare at a lesser cost. I fully agree government is supporting in some of the schemes like the Ayushman Bharat scheme or some other government schemes, but majority of the people are still paying out of the pocket. Or even if the insurance is paying, the premiums are a little high. So the healthcare can only survive in case we reduce our operation cost. And naturally, we have to make the systems lean managed, and then only we are going to see. This is an opportunity to take stock of situations, train our doctors, train our consultants, train our staff people to realign the thinking in the terms of becoming more efficient. That's what I feel about the today's corona crisis. I'm looking at it at a positive way. I'm not scared about the next 1 month or 2 months losses, but I'm looking at the profits in the long. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh. May I request Hitesh to please speak on this?
Well, thank you, Ravi. See, what has to be understood is that while all of us are braving up to the odds of corona and in various ways, healthcare is specifically in a very unique place wherein not just are the staff and the healthcare workers required to look after themselves, they're supposed to be at the front line of this pandemic, saving lives. And whilst doing so, what's also ending up happening is that, again, some of us on our own and otherwise because of the government orders also, OPDs, elective procedures, etc., are all to be stalled. Radiology is off, OPDs are not there, electives are not there. At the same time, your staff has to be around for taking care of emergency. And while doing so, they have to be given all the paraphernalia to protect themselves, which is adding up to the cost. Treating anybody walking in even for a emergency or an elective today, one has to go with the premise, given the rise in asymptomatic carriers, that these patients are COVID positive. And therefore, if there is some time and it's not a life threat, then a test has to be done. That's also an additional burden. So right now, the counseling to the patient also changes because suddenly the cost of surgery per se is also going up. Because, and if you were to not pass all that charge on, which is not possible at all times, so you can charge it on, the protective gear is equally eating into the margins of the hospital. The 2, 3, 4 months of revenue dip, is going to eat up into the reserves that have been generated by the hospital over the years. Because at the end of the day, it is single digit or at best 15% EBITDA, or if you are very efficient, 18% EBITDA is what you are working on, which is almost equivalent to your month's revenue, which has been completely washed away. So these are certain unique challenges that we are faced with, wherein we have to safeguard the interest of the healthcare workers. Costs have to be reduced at the same time that morale has to be kept up. Clinicians have to be counseled. Those who are above a certain age, you have to avoid them from coming into the facility. So, something like a teleconsult is getting promulgated in a metro setup. Maybe it's that much more popular. In a tier 2 in Punjab, I don't know Dr. Sood's feedback, but places like UP, Mathura, it takes time for the people to adapt to the fact that they are not going to physically see a doctor. It has changed and it is for the good and people are adapting it. But then these are again unprecedented times. Now, I think once we are opening up OPDs, typically we are using the thermal guns, but there are certain product innovations that we are looking at where we are trying to integrate the thermal cameras into the DFMDs so that the volume of patients and attendants coming in, they are scanned. And in case we feel that one is a borderline issue, there are certain thermal retina scanners that have come in that can give the internal body temperatures. So these are again things that are being done to safeguard the facility as well as the people around. But at the same time, this has a cost impact. Bombay, I was in a FICCI call yesterday. Bombay has seen certain situations where the government has come up with a directive irrespective of the bed category, and that is a virtual death knell for the Bombay hospital sectors. They have freezed the rate of procedures across specialties at equivalent to Ayushman rate irrespective of the bed category. So, you cannot be doing things like this. Today, a lot of population is still not insured. Those who are insured, panel patients, the payments are not coming in. We are still supposed to give them cashless services. We made representations that, at least some 90% ad hoc or 80% ad hoc limits of the credit bills are credited to us because, it's not just about revenue, it's also about cash flows. Today, we are suffering not just fixed costs, we are looking at a reduced revenue and even a further reduced cash flow coming into the system. So suddenly the cash flow cycle has taken a complete toss. And on the other end, when we, across the sectors, as the various panelists have discussed, one is looking at a cost reduction. People are going out, migrant labor is going out. what is also ending up happening is a lot of people are going to now go below the poverty line. Ayushman, the 50 crore family does not cover the entire base. There is still almost 50 or 60% Indians which are not covered by any sort of insurance at all. Private sector insurance is just limited to 12-13%. And Ayushman is a very small portion. So maybe the government should be looking at a universal healthcare, as Dr. Gupta was saying. Cost efficiency is at one point, but at the same point of time, you have to ensure that everybody is insured, because if something of this sort was to happen, families are just going to get wiped out, if not by the disease, but by the burden of the treatment of that disease. And this is something critical that the government needs to do. And 70% of India ultimately is taken care of by the private sector. So you cannot shy away from the fact that a collaborative approach has to be done for us, with us. Doctors are the ones who are battling this on ground. So some side, you've talked of a bailout package for various other industries, but healthcare somehow has been completely neglected. At the end of the day, the private sector generates revenue from the patients and the walk-ins that are coming in. Nobody is giving us gratis. Even a trust-based hospital, for that matter, is supposed to be working on a break-even model. It's not as if somebody bequeathed unlimited or an infinite wealth and they're supposed to sustain. The maths has to add up. Unfortunately, today, we're doing a dedicated COVID center. You have to have everybody, right from the security guard to the clinician, wearing an N95 mask. An N95 mask today is highly expensive. So you're looking at a fixed additional cost of 20,000-30,000 per day just for the mask. Then you bring in the PPE kit. These days, the PPE kits earlier before COVID would include an N95. Now they don't. And the N95 and the PPE kit almost cost the same. So, you're looking at that as an additional cost. Then the very typical part is, even the doctor or the clinician or any other worker who's there in a COVID facility, they have to also undergo a period of quarantine, and their society unfortunately is not going to allow them in. So as a hospital, one has to provide a separate lodging boarding facility for these people for the duration of their stay in the facility, as well as the post quarantine area. So costs are something that are becoming disproportionate to what the incomes are. And at the same time, the staff has to be counseled. They are feeling left out. The family doesn't want them around. Family doesn't want them to go. They are there to serve. So, you constant counsel. We've got a psychiatrist who've got in touch. Family has to be counseled. Think about the patient. There is no symptom. He's got COVID. In a lot of cases, there's not even fever, but you're supposed to undergo a 14-day of isolation, not meeting anyone, staying alone. So, they also need counsel. So these are very strange and difficult and different times, and calls for certain unprecedented measures. So, forum like e-health, I think all of us collectively, we would want you to highlight the plight of the healthcare worker, the plight of the private sector, the fact that private sector is shouldering the responsibility of the government at this hour, but then the sector also needs a bailout. A GST credit allowing healthcare organizations a CENVAT credit would be a major step in this direction. The cost that we pay, it's a direct expense in our balance sheet right now. If that is allowed as a chargeable expense, it will go a long way. Likewise, some sort of concessions. Why should we be left out? Because we are the ones right now, we are the virtual army or the ones on the front line in this case. So something has to be bailed out. A bailout package, soft loans, whatever, have to be given out for us.
Yes, Yatish, I think what you have highlighted is a very critical point, and we at eHealth magazine are trying to organize these forums like this. And in fact, we are going to write about it in our magazine, on our portal, online, on our social media. And I will, in fact, request each of our panelists right now to create a write-up, one-page write-up, two-page write-up, which details out all these challenges of the hospital sector and the need why government has to support it, because everyone is like talking about doctors or the corona barriers, but their salaries are getting reduced in these challenging times because of various factors. So we have to talk about all these issues. May I request Dr. VP Singh to please give your inputs.
Okay, I have, in fact, my comments have become easier because I've heard other panelists, they have covered most of the points. However, I would like to emphasize that medical college associated hospitals, the situation is a little different because the resources in such private medical colleges is difficult because as such they are not running in the profits, even in the not in conditions of situation like this, because revenue which used to be possibly from medical college is not coming forth as used to be earlier because of the NEET system and all those things. There was a time when, for example, whatever requirements we wanted in any private medical college used to come forth because there was no dearth of funds. But now over the last 2-3 years, that is not the case. Now, virtually, what is happening is that when we confront such situation, actually we have to just think from where they get the resources, as happened in this case. At the same time, only thing is that possibly the government must have realized that it is the high time to get the private colleges and their hospitals in loop when they are scheming the things for the disaster management of the nation. Because we are left alone on those things. This is basically focusing on the government colleges or hospitals. So with the result, we are not in tune with what we are supposed to do. And suddenly we find that there are a lot many requirements in the terms of your disposables or PPEs and whatever this thing. And that hindered initially because as we mentioned earlier that even health workers, they are scared because initially we did not have good quality PPE. Of course, this phenomenon was universal. So that was the things. But anyhow, we could convince our own health workers and said we will see that and we must get a good quality PPE. If you talk of good quality or certified PPE by DRDO or CITRA or something like that, it's just not possible. But at the same time, even the PPE of 3 level, if you aware that 3rd level PPE is very heavy stuff and very difficult to healthcare workers to work with that because it's very uncomfortable. They complained many times. So we are giving the things, but still they are not comfortable. At the same time, the training part has to be taken care of. Now, even the donning and doffing of the PPE itself, because there are as mentioned by one of the panelists, that people or at large, they are scared even that doctors can infect the patient. Yes, it is possible. And other way around, doctors or healthcare workers may not get infection only from the patient, but by their own fault, by not the correct technique of PPE donning and doffing. So these are the small issues, but at the same time, very important when we are managing. But I'm of the opinion that as we say that any incident gives us some lesson. Now here, this COVID-19, now what is most important is that we do not have the culture we should have in the hospitals, which is supposed to be. Now, the main crux is that IPC measures, infection preventive control measures, is the thing. Though it is on the paper in most of the hospitals, now it is a huge subject, huge areas, like standard precautions, then environmental control, then surface areas, then like OTs, like the HEPA filters, like other things which part of it, and that whether it's done properly or not, it is the issue. Not only that, we do not have that kind of mindset in our own doctors when they are taking the rounds and all this thing, because infection can take place with your stethoscope or even the pen, what we're using, other things. So now these things should come in. We should realize that it's the time to develop those good habits, not only for we teach others, but for ourselves, that we follow these things and we should see that we practice in the future. Now, another thing I want to highlight is that we talked of the technology. Yes, technology is going to play a great role. I am the proponent of this because right from the ICU, because actually I'm cardiac anesthetist basically done from AIIMS, and I'm working also here as a professor and head anesthesia along with the vice principal and additional chief medical superintendent. So I realized that our ICUs, as should be managed, are not managed. Because in most of the hospitals, I've seen other hospitals also, that things are not as great as it should happen. The protocols are in the place, but actually is followed or not, it is not happening. So that habit remains, and then we forget about corona or COVID disease, but even the normal cases, we have the problems. So here, like for example, COVID, now how we should intubate, intrathecal intubation in these patients, to particularly those aerosol generating procedures, like when we are intubating the patient or giving the oxygenations, various techniques, we are giving the oxygenation. Now, for example, if you want to give non-invasive method of giving oxygen to the patient, when there is initially saturation is low, so that time, like, high flow nasal catheters or cannulas, if you give, then that pressure of that room should be low. But it is all just on theoretically, it's not possible. So there is a time we should go for technology, like negative pressure isolation rooms, or intubation chambers, or the video laryngoscopes. So this is the time to update ourselves to the equipments or the technology which can help us. Similarly, the electronic medical records or the health records. So these are the things which should be or like e-prescription. Even in the prescription in the ICU setting, it should be e-prescription, not on the writing of the case sheet. In the computer is written is followed by the staff. So, but we need a lot of training that people should be on the same page, should be able to follow and all those things. So similarly, we talked about this like telemedicine. Now, telemedicine, there is exhaustive government guidelines on this is already there, is already in the place, but it will take time to practice. Now, actually, our tendency over the general populace, they do not feel satisfied unless they see the doctor physically. So this is going to take time, these technology, whether they will be satisfied or they will come or they will not come. So those things has to take into consideration. However, now this like e-mobile health, that is also coming up, which is more handy, where actually now they are coming up with the personalized, highly personalized apps, where actually the patient can take the help of e-mobile health. Something is there, he can put his signs, symptoms, and possibly get something out of it. And at the same time, he can virtually meet the physician. So this technology, I believe that the technology, it is one aspect which I'm talking about, but there are so many other technologies like health wearables, or the many other things like there is a lot of scope to research. The government should wake up now that next time we face this problem, then are we ready for this? Are the whole communities ready? Are all hospitals are ready? Or all the stakeholders, are we taking with confidence? So the government should look into this, that particular private setup. That is good. Actually, so far, I feel that government is happy that all the private sector, they have come up to their expectations without cribbing for anything. But at the same time, cannot go long, because I think that another 3-4 months, they are going to be very poor revenue generating things, because as it is just going up. Like for example, my hospital, we are converting to the whole COVID hospital. So there is no revenue, nothing, but we have to manage those cases at priority. So these are the few things which I thought we should be included. And then like robotics. Now I think AIIMS has already introduced robotics to distribute that food at least to the patient, and can manage from the one corner of the ward, isolation ward. This you must have seen on the TV pictures. So this is something is encouraging, but in India itself, we are already doing it, and we should do it. We should not hesitate. And then one of the things, artificial intelligence. Now this is a long way to go, of course, but this can play a great role, particularly in the pandemics, where they can early detection of containment areas or the remote monitoring. So it can guide us. So artificial intelligence, yes, like so this can help us. So these things, I think one should think those lines. Then when we prepare post-pandemic, so that was the subject which was to be discussed. So I thought we should think of the technology and see that in the future we plan it out and introduce in our hospital settings and practice it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. VP Singh. Very comprehensive inputs you have given. I will be requesting each of the panelists to briefly talk about, and I will request to keep the time limit under 2 minutes to talk about infections. So infection has been a major challenge in hospitals. How innovative tools can possibly keep it at bay, ensuring patients a safe and sound health. So may I request Dr. Rakesh around? Can I invite him to speak?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah, Rakesh, if you
Just
can
a minute.
talk about the infections, the challenge, and how do you deal with it?
Okay. So I already discussed about the infections which are happening in the hospital. Dr. VP is saying exactly dwelled more on the infection control practices. We at our hospitals have been developing a culture of infection control. Whatever we are teaching, they are practicing. It has taken us a long time in developing those habits of hand hygiene and being sensitive about the hospital-acquired infections. Our quality team really works very hard, and we have been able to bring down the hospital-acquired infections to a very, very large extent. Our infection incidences to almost match the international standards. That's about the culture. Technology definitely has to help us a lot. For example, this gentleman, Dr. Mr. Gaurav Arya, he told about the bioindicators getting results within 15 minutes. It's a very good technological tool where we can have a very good recall policy and we can be sure about our implants getting through the sterilization processes that they are absolutely safe. Otherwise, at times, the implant is already into the body and your culture may fail. The sterilization may fail. So that technology is going to help us that way. The second thing I said that by improving the efficiency and reducing the number of patient contacts, that's going to reduce the number of chances of hospital-acquired infections. For example, automated ICUs, the monitors, they're getting directly into your data system, and then you can always pull the data. The home monitoring systems, the telemetry systems, the technology can pitch in over there to reduce the number of contacts with the patients, and thus can reduce the hospital-acquired infections. That's my opinion about the technology, innovation sector technology, which can bring down the incidence of hospital-acquired infections. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rakesh. May I request Dr. Sopat to respond on this infections problem issue?
I think infection control in the pre-COVID area was well documented and how infection control should be done. And yes, steroid was an important portion even then. But there are certain things which we will need to bring in the post-COVID or in the interim COVID area. There are certain issues which need to be addressed. So for example, when a patient is admitting into the hospital, whether he is a COVID patient or not, or is a COVID suspect or not, you have to set up protocols for that. So how you are going to manage a patient. Even a patient can be asymptomatic for COVID, may have come with other symptoms which are not related to his COVID. He's a heart patient and he has come for his heart checkup, needs an admission for that, but he's also COVID positive. I mean, how you separate this patient away from the rest of the patients who were actually supposed to be COVID free, and you don't have a test on either of those people. So for example, certain innovations, you might have to make flow controls into the hospital. You need to separate the high risk population at the entry of the hospital. Okay, you are more likely to be COVID than others. Then put the patients, they put them through the testing protocol. If they agree, and if they don't agree, then you have separate. For example, simply in our hospital, what we have done, one floor we have dedicated to all admissions which are coming, all the general admissions were coming up to one floor, which is treated as a COVID suspect area. Then the other floors are COVID free floors we have put in. So a patient can graduate from the COVID suspect area to the COVID free only after the PCR test. So in this case, he has to give permission to do the COVID test, like HIV test, like other tests, you have to seek his permission, especially since the government has said that you cannot sort of make that as a criteria for admitting or not admitting. So you simply ask the patient's consent. If he consents, you do the RT-PCR and the chest CT, and if those are negative, you can shift him to the COVID safe area. Otherwise, he remains, if he doesn't agree to the test or his test is equivocal or not, this thing, then he stays in that area, and that area is manned as a special COVID containment area. It is marked, and the patient is admitted and discharged from that area. So for example, if the patient comes out positive 5 days later after you have admitted and discharged the patient, the civil authorities will come and seal your hospital unnecessarily. So all you have to do is to tell them, okay, we had put them in a COVID safe area, in a COVID suspect area. We were following all precautions. He was in this room, and you will have a list of contacts in there. The second innovation will focus on decreased man-to-man contact. It will, whether it is the doctor, whether it is the staff, whether it is the ward boys or whatever, how many people who can come in contact with the patient will need to be severely limited. Even the attendants who are coming into the hospital, you will need to limit those. You cannot have those visiting hours which you had in the hospitals earlier when anybody could come and visit the patient. It's all over. You have to tell them his visiting hours are suspended. No need to visit the patient. He will come back to home. You can visit him as many times as you like after he comes back home. But hospital is not a area where you'd like to visit this thing. Also, I think general wards in the COVID suspect areas are going to be virtually out of sync. You have to have now single occupancy cubicles with the areas where you admit the patient, where the patient is isolated from other patients, and where you have infection control practices where you don't mix the personnel and the equipment which is going to be used with the patient. So you have to minimize the contact. Of course, you cannot sort of eliminate it altogether, but you can minimize it to a large this thing. And of course, let us say you are doing surgery, so you have COVID days. You have patients who are COVID positive. You operate only in the COVID theater on the COVID days, and you make the necessary preparations on those particulars there. Then you admit the patients only in COVID wards. So all these infection control and innovations will need to come in. I think as the private hospital will start feeling the pressure, these will increase the cost of the COVID patient treatment, and these costs will, I don't know how the government empanelments are going to manage and how the insurances are going to, but this is going to become a very important aspect of the manage the patient.
Sure. May I request Dr. Sunil Kumar to please respond on the infections issue?
I think a lot has been said about the infection control. Infection technology lays to the training. That is the answer. If only training, only a technology will not solve the problem. Most of the time we have that technology, or most of the time we have the things in place, but we do not know how to use it. So therefore, the need of the hour is to actually go for the advanced training, the educate our people, and the judicious use of the technology which is available. Technology will not come cheaper, but at the end of the day, it will reduce the cost. It is actually a quality assurance. The quality, most of the time, we feel that quality cost, but actually reduces the cost. So the need of the hour actually is to use the technology and train the people, take the fear out of their mind. At the end of the day, we have to live with it. As a matter of fact, we say that isolated wards or the cubicles, the thing. The physical distances, ultimately, if you ask me that what is the main cause of this, there are so many hypotheses which are going on. There are so many suppositions are going on. It is airborne, not born, it stays on this. I read an article when it said that the consignment was received by a factory, and the person who was in charge of that warehouse, he got infected because he had received a consignment from this. And when on this viral check, that this came to the truth. So the life of that virus, kya hai? But therefore, as we have rightly said, and we all think, in my hospital, in our hospital, what we say is that we are taking all the precautions. But the problem comes not only from the suspected case. The patient, the problem comes with the non-suspected case. Anybody can. So the basic thinking now is treat every patient as a COVID suspect unless it's proved otherwise. So this is the thing which is probably going to change, and ultimately look at the policies or the thing which government expects. And I'm not against the government in particular or something, but the thinking which comes up without thinking. Okay, look, dialyze the patient without asking for a COVID test. If the patient comes positive, fine, quarantine the staff, quarantine the area, maybe area can be controlled, but ultimately the dialysis will be done the technician and the people only. And they are quarantined for 14 days. And maybe longer period also. You ask for the report doesn't come. It used to come in 24 hours and 48 hours or 72 hours. And if you read Times of India yesterday, a doctor was to stay in the hospital for 37 days because the report didn't come. Now, what it is a criminal wastage job. It is a great injustice done to the professionals who have to actually deliver the healthcare. So the technology, you ask for the kits, okay, the rapid kit, they're giving a false report. So I don't think anybody can be blamed for this. But at the same time, the application of mind and the more clarity, we all look at as something. Look at what DHS expects. Look at the local authorities expect. The COVID authorities expect. They all have different views, and they all say that what we say, you follow that one, and they are in fact contradictory to each other. The infection control, unless infection control is there, infection control is what? It is only to control it, physical distance, taking precautions by whatever way. So that is going to the answer.
Sure. May I request Yatish to please respond on the infections issue?
Well, in terms of infection control, again, a good CSSD system is going to be going forward critical. And in terms of technology, the eICU solutions, which till now were perhaps tom-tommed by some of the premier institutes, they are going to be, because contactless monitoring is going to be one of the areas that's going to see precedence. And there are a lot of new players, innovators rather, who worked with companies like GE and Philips down south, who made localized products, and we at NITI have been using them. So they allow you to e-chart and not just limit it to a particular manufacturer. They allow you to be technology agnostic. So long as your system is a HLL7 compliant system, all your equipments in the ICU, they are able to communicate, and the doctor is able to, the intensivist is able to remotely monitor the patient, which is going to be true in a post-COVID era, more so in specialties or facilities where they would want to optimize on the manpower count and have senior resources working in across multiple units, because cost control and revenue optimization, cost optimization is going to be a key driver. Likewise, perhaps the situation is also going to seek some reform in the PCPNDT. Today the biggest challenge that we are facing is getting ultrasounds done. A remote reporting of a CT and a MRI is very well established now. But then what do you do about the ultrasound? There are largely ladies who were doing these ultrasound, and the families are not allowing them to come over to the hospital. How do you address those situations? So some sort of a relaxation the government would have to do, though they are right now giving us fast approvals for PCPNDT because we've got to get some more clinicians empaneled. We'll have to work around those solutions. And some AI based apps, as I was telling you earlier, the thermal scans, these would have to be done. And the programming has already happened. We are intending to launch this at the Women's Center by end of the week, wherein anybody not wearing masks, the system will not allow you to gate crash and enter the facility. Likewise, the iris scan will ensure that the internal body temperatures are also mandated. As Dr. Sunil and others on the panel were also saying, Dr. Rakesh too, one has to, and earlier as stated by me, anyone entering the facility has to be taken in as a suspected COVID positive, especially if any elective has to be done. Until the tests come in, one cannot go ahead and compromise the OT complex or the hospital building per se. Starad is a solution that we've been using, but again, there are views in terms of whether, along with the other low cost or the low temperature items that are getting treated in the machine, can we put in a COVID N95 mask in the same cycle? And there are divergent views that how can we expose the non-COVID patient items getting treated there? And secondly, if you were to not treat them and just get in a Starad cycle for a N95, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gaurav, we've done the mathematics, which is I was asking you. It typically works out to almost 2,500 rupees a cycle for 10 masks. So the reuse cost itself is about 250 rupees, which then, throws those calculations out of the bucket altogether. Now, cost optimizations will have to be done, I think, somewhere down south and in the anesthesia departments, where a lot of aerosol generation is taking place. And for intubation, they have made these additional glass chambers with disposable masks. These are local innovations that are taking place at a hospital level with the biomed team and the anesthesia and the intensivists coming together. Sample collection, likewise, instead of throwing away PP at every 6 hours, we are doing a common booth, a glass booth. And in those booths, we are giving surgical gloves, which are being used. And so, we try and optimize on the costs. Because what this pandemic is treating you is that people are not going to come to you, be it any sector, if the priority is not there. Anything which is beyond the need criteria as on date will not be floating in the market. People are going to be very conservative in terms of any expense that they undergo, because their inflows are impacted irrespective of which category or sector they are working in. And therefore, every dime that they spend has to be justified. Likewise, the same holds true for us. We as healthcare warriors have to battle out this crisis. But at the same time, every cent that we will save right now will help us, credit one more salary or allow us another days of survival in these tough times. And as stated earlier again, we would need to plead with the government to look at ways to at least improve our cash flows in addition to whatever swaps are there. And all credit payments that are there, typically they should look at clearing the credit payments, the credit bills in a cycle of 30 days, if not lesser. And all old pendencies which are running into crores for all of us, they need to be cleared ASAP, along with maybe TDS refunds, etc., for all of us, because that fund is going to be critical for our survival, because we have nowhere else to go.
Sure. May I request Gaurav to respond on the infection, the points raised by the panelists?
Yeah, sir, thank you for asking this question. So actually, the cycle cost, like I was mentioning in the beginning also, will remain the same. It's not that you're running a separate kind of a cycle for reprocessing or sterilizing N95. As per the recommendation, we can keep up to 10 masks in one cycle, 5 on top, 5 on each tray. I also wanted to share that, from a purely coronavirus perspective, the virus from a sterilization perspective is actually very easy to kill. In fact, all the viruses are very, very easy to kill from a sterilization perspective, because it's a shelled virus, and most of the other viruses, including HIV, HBV, and even coronavirus, is not a very difficult virus to kill. In fact, from a stage or category perspective, it is amongst the lowest and the easiest categories of or microorganisms that can be easily killed. So, if the cycle cost for our Sterard typically ranges between 1200 to 1500, and depending upon if you're putting 10 masks in each, per mask cost would come to 150. So I am assuming that if you are keeping other items also together with N95, then the overall cycle cost will definitely come down. Obviously, they have to be packed as per the protocol. The other thing, just to add to everybody, what everybody, all the panelists have shared, is that at least for the near to mid-term, the biggest thing that we in Johnson & Johnson, we feel that healthcare will have to consider is cost, because revenue nobody will have a very much control on, whether it's incoming OPD patients or diagnostics or pharmacy revenue or elective surgeries. So the only thing which will dedicate one's profitability in ROI will be costs. And like all of you have mentioned, that how can we reduce costs? And as a healthcare provider, as a healthcare company, we feel that technology will play a very, very key role. And J&J has been there in this sterilization field for many years. We definitely feel that obviously from the ownership perspective or the upfront cost, technology always comes at a particular cost, particular price. But in today's times, it actually dictates that how you will be able to save costs on personnel, which is people, costs on doing repeat tasks, which are done just because people are there in a hospital, especially in a CSHD, cost of maintaining records, cost of doing repeat sterilization because workflow interruptions happen. All of these are costs that nobody has actually seen so far, or rather really paid attention to, because we were living in reasonably good times in healthcare. But like sir mentioned, that these are times which is actually compelling us to really reduce inefficiencies in the system. And this is the key point: cost optimization and efficiency, which everyone has mentioned about. Yeah.
Great. So we are at the end of the session, and I'm going to request each of the panelists to give concluding remarks in 1 minute each. And the remarks I will request each to talk about the what are your expectations from the government. So I'm going to request 1 minute each of from each of the panelists, and we will then conclude this session. So I am asking Dr. Sunil Kumar to give your comment on this.
I think what we expect from the government is they should be concentrate, and as one of the panelists said, that when we talk about some packages are being announced, we always are at the receiving end. Payments are not made. People at the government want us to deliver the services at a much reduced cost, and putting the burden and putting restrictions, putting all those things that don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. They are not looking into giving some relaxation in the terms of GST and the other taxes, income tax rebates, the refunds, expediting the payment. So what we expect them, and at the end of the day, probably they should treat hospital as a part of them. This is what it is expected. They should not feel that, okay, this is a foreign body, and they have to be shunned off like a coronavirus.
Sure. Dr. Rakesh Gupta.
Yeah, I personally think that the government should look considerably at the revision of the CGHS tariff rates, which were last revised somewhere around 2014. 40 to 45% of the business of the large healthcare, majority of us, comes from the government schemes, whether it's directly CGHS, ECHS, or related panels. So the rates must be revised rationally, and there should be a rationalization of the tariff structure as well. There are certain procedures which cannot be really done, even the cost cannot be recovered if you do it at the CGHS. So that is one aspect which I like to do. Second, as we discussed earlier as well, as Mr. Yatish Vahal said, that let there be some tax restructuring, like the GST input should be given to us. So also the TDS refunds, they should be adjusted. The TDS should be adjusted about with the taxation we are going to go. Rather than getting the refunds, the TDS must be getting adjusted. And thirdly, I personally feel that the government should take care of the taxation part, as well as import duties, the extra custom duties, and they should be promoting the startups by giving us softer loans. Although I agree that the loans are becoming easier, but still, because the hospital industry is very capital intensive, the newer investments should be coming at even lesser interest rates, and there should be soft loans given to us as healthcare, as a bailout package, you can say, if not the direct cash.
Sure. May I request Dr. Sopan to please respond?
Yes, I think Dr. Sunil and Dr. Rakesh Gupta have mostly covered the thing, but I have a suggestion that at least for the CGHS rates, perhaps they can do the same system which they have done for the oncological rates in CGHS. That's a very fair solution. And with that, most of the patients are also getting a treatment earlier. Used to even sort of entertain cancer patients because of the negative billing which used to occur for. Another thing which I think is most of the hospitals have some amounts of loans which are going on, because all the hospitals which have been set up have had to use loans to sort of buy their capital. And these loans could be restructured from their mandatory closure in 7 years, which is a usual for all the equipment loans which you buy. Perhaps the timing can be extended, or they can be softened further, or perhaps the rate can be varied. Yes, it is easier to get loans now, no doubt about it, especially from one of the, if you have a good credit this thing. But loans would be a good area where to reduce the burden on the thing. The third thing is in reducing the fixed cost to the hospitals, cost of electricity, cost of perhaps they can give a little cheaper electricity, not consider them as a industrial or some where we have to pay commercial rates of electricals. Perhaps we can get cheaper rates of electricity. And even the pollution control norms, which might need little bit of loosening, especially for smaller hospitals, 50 bedded, 40 bedded, 60 bedded hospital, 70 bedded hospital. They could save a lot if some of the pollution norms are not sort of enforced on those hospitals. Also, the government could take part in paying the complete PF, the complete ESI for these for the employees, which will help us in sort of be interested in to retain the workforce. Otherwise, as the revenues will go down, we will be forced sooner or later to release some of the employees, to tell them, okay, can you come back a couple of months down the line? Perhaps the situation will be better there, and then we can pay, because it is better to have one satisfied employee than two dissatisfied employees. And that is how I think some of the innovations will need to come into the financial sector from the government.
Sure. And we can Gaurav, your inputs, if any. And we can
Yeah, I just have two inputs. One is on the GST reduction for most of the hospital items that are used in a hospital, whether it's consumables or devices. That will really reduce the cost burden also, because the hospitals cannot really claim those GST benefits. And the second would be that from a policy perspective, the sterilization cost that the hospital incurs should be allowed to be reimbursed or charged to the patient, or to be reimbursed by the insurance companies. That will also really help us hospitals to really pay a lot of stress and focus and emphasis on their infection processes if these costs are reimbursable by the insurance companies.
So with this, I thank all the panelists, esteemed panelists who have joined us here. Amazing session, a lot of knowledge. I learned actually a lot in this session, and I hope all the audience who have joined us on the Zoom and the Facebook have got a lot more ideas and developed more appreciation for our hospitals who are actually fighting this corona battle in these tough times. And I request all the audience, if you have liked the session, please like and share this video on the Facebook, so that the ideas which have got generated here are reaching to a lot more people, and actually it also reaches our policy makers, so that more attention to our health sector happens from our policy makers of the country. With this, I thank all the speakers and all the audience for joining us. And we are doing almost every week a webinar on the health sector. So I request all the audience to keep checking our eHealth Facebook page, and you can see many more webinars there. Thank you so much, all of you, and namaskar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.